When Trump accused Obama of lacking Christian values on live TV, nobody expected Obama to answer with a single Bible verse. A verse so powerful it silenced the entire hall and left Trump visibly rattled. The camera lights were almost blinding, cutting across a sea of faces inside a packed civic center in Phoenix, Arizona. This wasn't just another campaign stop. It was a nationally televised town hall, the kind that would be replayed on late-night news shows and carved into memory. Every seat was taken from the floor to the highest balcony. Reporters lined the walls with cameras, laptops, glowing fingers, ready to type every slip of the tongue. Viewers at home could feel the energy through the screen. The tension before something big. President Donald Trump sat at center stage. Posture, tall, chin, slightly lifted hands clasped together like a man ready to fight. With words to his right, former President Barack Obama waited calmly, almost motionless, as though he had been here 1,000 times before. He leaned back in his chair, shoulders loose, eyes fixed not on Trump, but on the crowd, as though he were already in a conversation with them. The crowd was split. Some came wearing red caps and T-shirts with bold slogans. Others wore simple clothes there for Obama, holding on to programs like souvenirs. When the moderator opened the event, the sound was deafening. Cheers clashed with jeers, whistles with clapping. It wasn't a town hall, it was an arena. What struck many watching wasn't the noise, but the sheer contrast between the two men. Trump animated, leaning forward like a boxer before the bell. Obama measured, leaning back, as if time itself had slowed for him. Two leaders, two styles, one stage. The moderator, a journalist from a Phoenix affiliate, didn't waste time. "Mr. President," he said, turning toward Trump, "tonight the country is watching both of you. And the question many Americans are asking is about values, the moral foundation that guides leadership. What do you want to say to the man sitting across from you?" Trump smiled, tightly gripping the mic. His voice cut sharp and fast. "I'll tell you this." He began jabbing a finger toward Obama. "People talk about his legacy. They talk about his so-called values. But let me tell you something, folks. You can't lead a country if your morals are questionable. And believe me, his morals, they've always been in question." Gasps rippled through the hall. Some in the crowd applauded loudly, standing up with fists raised. Others sat frozen, mouths half open. Trump wasn't pulling punches. His tone carried accusation, almost like he was prosecuting a case before a jury of millions. Obama didn't move. He didn't flinch, didn't blink. Instead, he rested one hand on his knee and breathed out slowly, eyes still scanning the audience. It wasn't just restraint, it was strategy. Those who had watched him for years could tell he was waiting for the right moment. The moderator turned, sensing the tension. "President Obama, do you want to respond?" But before Obama even touched his microphone, the noise of the crowd swelled again. A woman sitting near the front row stood up and shouted, "Show him who you are." Applause thundered behind her on the other side. Trump supporters booed, some chanting his name. The camera swung across the divided crowd, capturing faces twisted in passion. America's split-screen politics, live and raw. Obama finally leaned forward, his fingers lacing around the microphone. He didn't speak right away. He let the noise carry on, fade a little, then fade. More silence is a rare weapon, and he wielded it with precision. In that pause, viewers at home could almost hear their own breathing. Families, watching from living rooms in Tucson, El Paso, or Reno, were glued to their screens. What would he say? Would he fire back? Would he defend himself? Instead, he smiled, a small, almost private smile, as if he was letting the room know he wasn't rattled. "Look," Obama finally began, his voice low but steady. "We're all here tonight because we love this country. And sometimes when we love something, we see it differently. We fight about it. But at the end of the day, leadership isn't about who can shout the loudest. It's about who can live with themselves when the shouting stops." The words dropped heavy, the way a stone drops in water. Trump's smile faltered. The crowd leaned in. The moderator shifted nervously, sensing the air change. "So you're saying..." But Obama lifted his hand lightly, signaling he wasn't done. And everyone knew the real answer was coming. But what no one expected was how he would use a single line, not of politics but of scripture, to turn the moment on its head. Trump leaned forward in his chair, microphone clutched tightly, eyes narrowed toward Obama like he had been waiting all night for this exact opening. The hall was buzzing with tension. Though he didn't let it stall him, he thrived on conflict, and this was his arena. You know what Trump said, waving his hand dismissively as if brushing away the weight of Obama's calm words? That all sounds nice. It sounds like something you read off a card, but let's be real here. People question your morals. Barack, they question what you stand for. They question your values. And I'll tell you, folks, I've seen it. I've heard it. The Bible Christian values, real American values, they're not in him, not at all. Gasps, then cheers, then jeers. The room erupted on one side. Men in baseball caps jumped up, clapping and yelling, "That's right," as if Trump had landed the knockout punch already on the other side. Obama supporters booed so loudly the moderator had to raise his hand, trying to bring the chaos down. But Trump wasn't about to pause. He leaned harder into the microphone, his voice growing more forceful. This man, Trump, continued his finger jabbing in Obama's direction. Talks about faith when it suits him, talks about values when it makes him look good. But when you look at what he did, the policies he pushed, the people he surrounded himself with, it doesn't add up. America deserves a leader whose morals are clear, not someone who hides behind fancy words. Obama tilted his head slightly as though the accusation itself didn't sting, but the tone revealed everything. He sat motionless, watching, waiting. His supporters in the crowd shouted back, a woman's voice ringing over the noise. "He's more Christian than you." The words cut through the hall, followed by a wave of applause. Trump's lips curled into a half smile. Part annoyance, part satisfaction. "See," he said into the mic, gesturing toward the woman. "That's the problem. People are fooled. Fooled by his speeches, fooled by his act. I'm not fooled, and I don't think America should be fooled either." The moderator looked uneasy, sensing the atmosphere pushing beyond control. "Mr. President," he interjected carefully, "the question was about values, but do you think—" But Trump cut him off. I think America's been played for 8 years. That's what I think. And now he wants to come back, sit here, act like he's some saint. Give me a break. We need leaders who are real, not ones who quote scripture when it suits them." The irony was thick in the air. Trump was daring Obama to bring faith into the conversation, almost daring him to try to use the Bible as a defense. The crowd could feel it. Viewers at home could feel it. This wasn't about policy anymore. This was about something deeper, something personal. In a living room in Fresno, a retired teacher sat forward on her couch, muttering, "Careful, Donald." Careful. In a diner outside Tulsa, truckers eating late-night burgers turned up the volume on the mounted TV forks, frozen midair in Phoenix. Parents with kids in their laps held their breath, knowing their children were watching more than just politics. They were watching two versions of leadership collide. Trump wasn't finished. He raised his voice, letting it carry over the audience's noise. "Let me ask you something, Barack, and you don't have to answer if you're scared, but tell the American people this. What morals guided you when you opened the borders? What morals guided you when you ignored working Americans for 8 years? What morals guided you when you pushed policies that hurt the church?" The words were pointed, delivered with the energy of a man throwing punches without gloves. The crowd responded in waves, applause, shouts, boos. It was chaos, exactly the kind of storm Trump thrived in. Obama still didn't move. He let the accusations hang in the air like smoke filling the room. The contrast was striking, Trump's chest heaving with intensity. Obama's shoulders still relaxed, hands folded loosely in his lap. It was theater, yes, but it was also something more. A test of composure. The moderator finally turned to Obama, almost pleading with his eyes for balance. "President Obama," he said, "I think the country would like to hear your response." The room quieted just enough for Obama to lean forward, mic in hand, but he didn't speak yet. He glanced down for a second, then looked back up at Trump, then at the audience, his expression unreadable for a moment. It seemed like he might let the words slide, that he might choose to ignore the provocation altogether. But the slight shift of his jaw, the faint lift of his eyebrows, it told a different story. He was going to respond, and when he did, it wouldn't just be words, it would be something that left a mark. But first, Obama would remind everyone in the room who he was, by the way he entered the conversation, calm, deliberate, and completely in control. The town hall had reached a boiling point. Trump's words still echoed in the rafters, stirring anger and applause in equal measure. The moderator looked exhausted, already gripping his pen, as if that alone could steady the chaos swirling through the hall. Cameras zoomed in on Obama's face, searching for a reaction, waiting for something, anything, that could break through the storm of sound. But Obama didn't rush. He adjusted the microphone slowly, letting the movement itself signal he was about to speak. The crowd began to hush in patches like waves pulling back before the tide. He cleared his throat lightly, then leaned forward. First, he said, his voice steady. Calm, not raised an inch. I want to thank the people of Phoenix for showing up tonight. Democracy doesn't work if folks don't show up. The hall erupted in applause, not wild but warm. His words were simple, but they carried weight in that moment. He wasn't just responding to Trump. He was addressing everyone watching, from the people in the bleachers to the family huddled around a TV in Wichita, Kansas. Obama glanced briefly at Trump, then back to the moderator. Now he continued, the president raised a serious question about morals, about values, and I think that's worth talking about. Trump's smirk flickered into something else, part irritation, part expectation. He shifted in his chair, drumming his fingers on the armrest as if daring Obama to stumble. But Obama's tone didn't waver. You know, I've never claimed to be perfect, none of us are. But when you lead a nation, you don't start with perfection, you start with intention. You start with the values that guided you when no cameras were on, when no applause was waiting. The moderator leaned forward, sensing the room leaning with him. Obama let his words breathe the silence between sentences, amplifying their power. He wasn't racing to outshout Trump. He was pacing himself like a marathon runner who knew the finish line wasn't in sight yet. He lifted his eyes toward the audience. For me, those values came from my mother, who taught me about kindness, from my grandparents in Hawaii, who worked hard every day without asking for recognition, and yes, from Scripture. Because whether you call yourself a Christian or come from another faith or no faith at all, there are truths that speak to every human heart. The words resonated across the hall. Even those hostile to him felt the sincerity in his voice. Some crossed their arms tighter, but they were listening all the same. Trump cut in, sharply raising his mic. Oh, here we go. Here we go. He's going to give a sermon. You had 8 years to prove those values. Barack and America saw the results. Don't act holy. Now, the interruption drew scattered laughs from Trump's supporters, but Obama didn't bite. Instead, he nodded slightly, acknowledging the jab before returning to the audience. You see, he said, calm as ever when someone questions your morals. The easy thing to do is to fight back with anger, to throw insult for insult. But I think the harder, more important thing is to ask, what do my actions say? What do the people who've lived under my decisions say? Because at the end of the day, leadership isn't measured by what you say in a debate. It's measured by the lives touched when the lights are off. A man in the crowd shouted, "That's right." The applause grew louder, swelling until it drowned out the remaining hecklers'. Cameras cut to faces in the audience. A young woman wiping her eyes, an older man clapping with both hands high above his head. Obama raised the hand, gently lowering the energy. Now President Trump says, I don't live by the Bible. Well, I don't need to carry it like a prop to know what's in it. I try to live by it, and it teaches us that strength isn't about shouting. Strength is about humility, integrity, sacrifice for a moment. The room went silent again. Even Trump seemed caught off guard by the bluntness. Leaning back slightly, as if recalibrating, the moderator spoke softly, breaking the pause. President Obama, are you saying your faith guided your decisions in office? Obama smiled faintly. What I'm saying is that my faith, like anyone's, is a compass. It doesn't mean I never made mistakes. It means I tried to do right by people, even when it wasn't popular, even when it cost me politically. That's what my mother would have wanted. That's what my faith asked of me. The hall erupted again, applause louder this time, surging through the rafters. The sound forced Trump to grip his mic tighter. Jaw set, he leaned forward, ready to counter, but the moderator raised a hand, knowing Obama still had the floor. Obama leaned back in his chair for the first time, shoulders loose again, eyes calm. He had set the tone. He had drawn a line in the sand without raising his voice. Once the crowd knew it. Trump knew it. Viewers at home knew it. But Obama hadn't even revealed his sharpest response. Yet the verse that would freeze the room and shift the entire night, The town hall was no longer just another campaign event. It had turned into something deeper, something raw, a clash, not of policies but of principles. Cameras caught every beat of sweat, every flicker of expression, every pause heavy enough to change the air in the room. Trump had thrown punch after punch. Obama had absorbed them all without raising his voice. Now it felt like everyone in Phoenix and across the country was waiting for the counterstrike. Obama leaned forward again, resting both elbows on his knees, microphone balanced in his hands. He didn't rush the crowd, hushed without being told. A few voices still shouted from the far edges of the hall, but even they seemed quieter, as if waiting for the exact words he would choose. He glanced at the moderator, then back at Trump, who was shifting impatiently, tapping his fingers against the chair. Obama let the moment stretch, filling the silence with nothing but expectation. "Let me tell you something," he began, voice steady, controlled. "When you grow up without much, you learn the value of listening before you speak. You learn to let others show you who they are by how they treat people when nobody's watching." The words hung in the air, deliberate and slow. "Now I know some people in this hall tonight don't like me. I know some watching at home don't trust me. That's part of democracy, but I'll tell you this, I never tried to divide folks by questioning their faith. Because the truth is, faith is between a person and God. None of us have the right to stand as judge and jury over another's soul." Murmurs spread across the crowd. Some clapped softly, others nodded their heads. Even those who disagreed couldn't deny the weight of the sentiment. Trump leaned forward sharply, his mic catching as he cut in. "That's easy to say, Barack, but the fact is you did plenty that hurt the church. Don't play innocent here." The moderator quickly interjected, "Mr. President, let him finish." Trump leaned back, scowling, but the damage was already done. His interruption only made Obama's calm seem stronger. Obama didn't react. He looked out across the sea of faces, then directly into one of the cameras. His voice dropping lower, almost intimate. "I'll share something with you tonight." He said something I've carried with me a long time. Back when I was a young man in Chicago, before I ever thought about politics, I worked with church groups trying to help communities that felt forgotten. I saw mothers raising kids without support. I saw workers losing jobs they'd had for decades. And I saw how faith gave them strength when everything else was crumbling. It wasn't politics that gave them hope. It was scripture. It was prayer. It was the belief that character mattered even when nobody else believed in them. The hall grew quieter still. The crowd leaned forward as if drawn by the gravity of his words. A camera zoomed in on a middle-aged woman clutching a program to her chest, eyes glistening. Obama paused, letting the weight of memory sit between them all. "That's why," he continued, "when someone questions my morals, I don't feel the need to shout back, because I know the life I've lived. I know the people I've stood beside. And I know the words that have guided me when I was lost." He stopped again. A long silence followed, the kind of silence that stretched into living rooms across the country, where families sat still waiting, barely blinking. Obama inhaled slowly, then exhaled. He raised his eyes not at Trump, but toward the crowd as a whole. His voice softened, carrying a rhythm almost like a sermon, without ever becoming one. "There's a verse I go back to often," he said, "a verse that reminds me what real strength looks like, and I think it's worth sharing tonight." The moderator leaned back in his chair, sensing the shift. Trump's eyes narrowed. The crowd straightened in unison, almost as if the room itself knew something defining was about to happen. Obama lifted the microphone closer to his mouth, paused and waited. The silence was electric now, a silence so full, so heavy, that even the cameras seemed to hesitate before zooming closer in homes from Bakersfield to Omaha. Viewers felt the tension through their screens. Phones buzzed with texts. "Are you watching this right now?" In diners across Texas, televisions had gone quiet as waitresses stopped pouring coffee to catch the moment. And then he spoke. "The book of Proverbs says the integrity of the upright guides them, but the unfaithful are destroyed by their duplicity." The room froze for one long heartbeat. There was nothing. No cheers, no jeers, no shouts, just silence. The words landed like a stone, sharp and immovable, echoing against the walls and sinking deep into everyone who heard them. Obama lowered the microphone slightly, his face unreadable. He didn't gloat, didn't smirk. He just let the verse breathe on its own, confident that it needed no decoration, but silence cannot hold forever. And what came next was an eruption that would shake both men in very different ways for a moment. The town hall felt like it had stopped breathing. The verse hung in the air, not rushed, not dramatized, just spoken. People in the crowd glanced at one another, some mouths open, others shut tight as though afraid to say anything out loud. A camera swept over the audience and caught the face of a young man with his hands clasped, whispering the words to himself as if testing how they sounded when repeated. Trump blinked hard, leaning back into his chair, the smirk gone. His lips parted slightly as though he had an answer. But no words came. He gripped the microphone tighter, but he didn't interrupt. Not yet. Obama stayed perfectly still. The pause stretched thick and deliberate. He didn't need to explain the verse. He didn't need to raise his voice. He simply let its meaning sink in. Finally, he lifted the mic again. Integrity guides us. That's what Scripture says, not anger, not ego, integrity. And when you forget that, when you start treating leadership like it's about you and not the people you serve, you lose your way. That's true for anybody. Doesn't matter who you are or what title you hold. The applause began softly, a few hands clapping near the front rows. Then, like a wave, it grew louder, spreading across the hall. People stood to their feet, some cheered, some cried. The noise became so powerful that for nearly 30 seconds Obama couldn't continue, even if he wanted to. In living rooms across America, families leaned forward. A woman in El Paso whispered to her husband, "Did you hear that a group of college students in Madison replayed the moment on their phones, instantly shaking their heads in disbelief?" It wasn't that the verse itself was new. Millions of Americans had read it before. It was the way it was delivered. The timing, the calm that contrasted so starkly with Trump's earlier storm. When the clapping finally softened, Obama spoke again. Faith isn't something you wear like a badge when it's convenient. It's not something you pull out to win applause. It's how you live when nobody's watching. It's how you treat the people who can't give you anything in return. That's what this verse means to me. And that's why when my morals are questioned, I don't feel the need to shout back. I'd rather let my life speak for itself. The moderator shifted in his seat, visibly impressed but careful not to show it too openly. He looked at Trump, expecting him to jump in, but Trump remained stiff, fingers tapping against the mic, his expression dark. Obama turned slightly toward him, not confrontational but steady. "Mr. President, you asked about my morals. That's my answer. You don't have to agree with me, but you can't take away the words that have guided me all these years. Words older than both of us. Words that will outlast both of us." The crowd roared again, some rising for a second, standing ovation. The energy was different this time, not just cheers from his supporters, but respect from some who hadn't clapped before. Trump finally raised his microphone. His voice came out sharp, louder than necessary, almost forcing control back into his hands. "Well, that's a nice little speech. You know, Brock, you're good with words. Everybody knows that. But let's not pretend quoting one line makes you the moral compass of America. It doesn't. We've seen your record. We know the truth." His words hit the air, but the sting wasn't there anymore. The timing had shifted. The verse had already done its work, cutting deeper than a long defense ever could. Even those who cheered for Trump moments earlier seemed quieter now, hesitant, unsure. The moderator leaned forward carefully. "President Trump, if I may." The audience seems to be responding strongly to President Obama's statement. "Would you like to address the scripture directly?" Trump frowned, caught in the question. He adjusted his tie, cleared his throat, and muttered, "Look, I respect the Bible more than anybody. Okay, more than anybody. But quoting it doesn't erase 8 years of bad leadership." The response drew some applause from his corner of the crowd, but it lacked the punch. Cameras caught a young woman behind him, shaking her head, whispering to the person next to her. The contrast was undeniable. Obama, meanwhile, leaned back again, finally resting his microphone in his lap. His expression didn't change, but the atmosphere told the story. He had shifted the ground beneath their feet. The moderator exhaled and moved the program along. "Gentlemen, we'll transition to questions from the audience shortly. But before we do, I think we've just witnessed a moment people will be talking about." For some time, the crowd clapped again, cameras flashing as the image of the two men on stage, one calm, one unsettled, burned itself into memory. But the real test wasn't just in the room. It was in the reaction that would explode across America within hours, reshaping how millions would remember. This night, the cameras caught every flicker of expression on Trump's face, his usual confidence, the sharp jabs, the smirks. The dominance of the room seemed momentarily fractured. The verse had landed harder than he anticipated. Obama hadn't raised his voice, hadn't attacked, hadn't even defended with policy. He'd simply quoted scripture, and in doing so, he made Trump's accusation feel small. But Trump wasn't the kind of man to leave silence hanging. He straightened in his chair, leaned forward and pulled the microphone closer. His voice was louder than before, a tone somewhere between anger and performance. Let me tell you something, folks. He began scanning the crowd like a salesman who refused to lose a deal. Quoting one line from the Bible doesn't prove anything. Anybody can do that, I can do that. That doesn't mean you lived it. And we all know, Barack, you didn't live it. That's the truth. His supporters clapped and cheered on cue. But the applause wasn't as strong as it had been earlier. It was scattered thinner. The cameras cut to the audience and revealed faces unsure, some with folded arms, others with eyes fixed on Obama, as if still processing his verse. Trump pushed harder. Look, I've been saying this for years. This man talks like a preacher. But when you look at the results, you see a different story. Churches struggling, families struggling, borders, wide open jobs, leaving the country. If that's guided by the Bible, then maybe he was reading the wrong one. A burst of laughter erupted from his side of the crowd, but even that felt strained, more like a reflex than genuine humor. Obama didn't interrupt. He kept his hands folded loosely in his lap, eyes resting on Trump with an expression that wasn't smug, but steady like a professor, watching a student try too hard to prove a point. The moderator, sensing the imbalance, jumped in President Trump. Are you saying scripture has no place in this discussion? Because earlier you challenged President Obama's faith directly? Trump waved a hand, scoffing. Of course it has a place. I respect the Bible more than anybody. Everybody knows that. I mean, I've held it, I've read it, I've quoted it many times. But this guy, he jabbed his finger toward Obama again. He uses it like a shield, and it's fake. Totally fake gasps rippled through the hall, louder than before, calling another man's faith. Fake on national television was a risk, and the audience felt it. Obama slowly lifted his mic, his calm voice threading through the noise. Mr. President, you can call me many things, but fake isn't one of them. The people of this country know who I am. They've watched me for decades. They've seen my flaws. They've seen my family. They've seen my faith in action. And the truth is, nobody needs me to prove it to you. They've already lived it. The audience roared again, some standing, some clapping so hard their hands turned red. Trump clenched his jaw, cutting in sharply. Oh, give me a break. You left this country divided weaker, and everybody knows it. You can't just sit there quoting verses and acting like you're the moral high ground. You're not. Obama didn't raise his voice. He let the applause die down, then leaned forward once more. Division doesn't start with disagreements. Division starts when leaders pit neighbor against neighbor, when they turn faith into a weapon instead of a guide. I've never been perfect, but I've never questioned another man's soul on national television. That's a line I won't cross. The statement drew a collective reaction, applause, shouts, cheers. Even some who had cheered Trump earlier sat back, visibly struck by the contrast. The moderator turned toward Trump again, voice low but insistent. Mr. President, do you want to respond? Trump exhaled sharply into the mic. You know what? I don't need to respond. The American people know the truth. They know what I stand for. They know I've delivered more than anybody else in history, and quoting one verse doesn't change that it was supposed to land like a hammer, but instead it sounded defensive. Thin cameras zoomed in on his face, capturing the slight flush of his cheeks, the tight grip on the microphone. Obama leaned back again, shoulders relaxed, a faint half smile on his lips. He didn't gloat, didn't speak. He just let the moment linger. The moderator cleared his throat and addressed the audience. We'll move to audience questions now, but clearly this exchange has struck a chord with many of you. The applause swelled again, and the cameras cut to faces across the crowd. Some cheering, some thoughtful, some clearly shaken by what they had just witnessed in living rooms, on phones, in diners and airports. The clip was already being shared. Already replayed, Obama's verse was traveling faster than Trump's rebuttal ever could. But the real storm was about to begin, not in Phoenix but across the airwaves and headlines as the country reacted to what had just happened. By the time the town hall wrapped, the story was already running ahead of itself. Reporters in the press section typed furiously, their headlines forming before the candidates even left the stage. Camera crews scrambled to get reaction shots, capturing the emotional faces in the crowd, while anchors whispered in earpieces that verse moment, loop it lead. With it, within an hour, major networks had cut together clips on CNN. The Chiron read, Obama fires back with Bible verse, crowd stunned. On Fox News, the headline was, Sharper Trump confronts Obama on morals. Heated town hall exchange. MSNBC played the entire exchange. Almost uninterrupted, the commentators stunned at how a single line of scripture had flipped the atmosphere of the event. Social media lit up like wildfire, Twitter feeds filled with clips of Obama's calm delivery, the verse transcribed in bold fonts across countless posts. Hashtags spread instantly, integrity show, Obama verse town hall, 2025. On Facebook, live streams from Phoenix spread across timelines, with comments pouring in at lightning speed. One viewer in Oklahoma wrote, that verse hit me harder than anything I've heard in years. Say what you want about Obama, but that was real. Another countered, Trump's right, quoting scripture doesn't make